Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. In this video I'm going to talk about lifting the lockdown, how we're going to get out of these extraordinary measures regarding coronavirus. What's the situation now in terms of how many hundreds of thousands dead all over the world? And the United States are doing particularly badly, having 5% of the world's population and over 20% of those who've died of coronavirus. Now, I'll take into account that some countries, totalitarian countries such as China, presumably falsify their figures as they lie about most things. So, therefore, America's figure, say 20% of the world's dead, coronavirus dead being American, that's probably too high. I'll be a bit lower, like 15%. At this point, I just got to pluck a number out of the air. But anyway, that's still obviously a dismal figure. The UK's figure is quite bad. Republic of Ireland, our figure is quite bad per capita. President Trump's obviously still dithering. He disregarded the expert advice for weeks. Experts are cut off at the knees by him. So I remember him reading out some advice and saying, and by the way, I'm not going to follow that one. So using his influence to sway people towards dangerous behavior. Remember, he urged people to pack the churches at Easter. Easter's just gone by. And of course, unfortunately, some people would have been unwise enough to follow his counsel. And of course, it's not just about you. If it was an individual's health, that'd be one thing. But you can pass on the diseases to others. Doctors and nurses trying to save you, they may catch it from you. And whilst the doctor and nurses are trying to save one patient who got coronavirus through their unwisdom, the doctor and nurse cannot save another person who is dying of something else, which is no fault of their own. So a death toll is rising in some countries, falling in most, thankfully. So South Korea and Taiwan seem to have got a really good handle on it, shown the way to deal with it. And Iceland, likewise, they tested so effectively, so much, they were able to isolate those who were infected and keep the rest of the population safe, and not even had to have a lockdown. Now they've got 300,000 people and quite a large area of land, like 500,000 square kilometers more. So a very diffuse population that can't be replicated in a much larger country or a much more densely populated country. But then again, presumably in relation to their national income, the cost of testing so much of the population would have been proportionate to what it would be in a much larger country. Say the Republic of Ireland with like 5 million people, or the US with 340 million people. But this is a decision that we make, what we prioritize, what we're willing to spend on. Anyway, Italy, France, Spain, they've all got it going down. Obviously, much too early to cry victory, but they're going to begin to loosen the lockdown. Admittedly, Spain's been one of the most severe in Europe, or probably the most severe. Someone I know lives there saying, you can't even go out to take exercise. The police are circling their patrol cars to stop you. And I can see why, because it was just tearing through their population. Anyway, the United Kingdom's lost over 11,000 people to it, and they say that's only those who died in hospital. Some people died at home or in nursing homes and not even been counting the statistics, so I've heard. So the statistics are probably actually worse than they at first appear. Then the other thing is we've got to look at the impact this had on the economy. I just think it's incalculable at the moment. We've been so preoccupied with looking at the death toll. And we're going to have to ask ourselves, how much is a life worth? Now, you may say you can't put a price tag on the life, which is a very noble sentiment, but get real. Money is finite. And are you willing to pay infinite amount of tax or have all sorts of other losses? And what are we living for? I realize not just material things. But the point will come that we will sustain so much economic damage that the economy wouldn't be able to support the healthcare system. I think that's quite a long way off yet. So how much money should be spent, or how much of an economic loss to save each person? £100,000, £500,000, £1 million? I don't know. And also, it's very difficult to calculate how many people will die if we do this and how many will do if we don't do that. We have to use guesstimates. And how much is it going to harm the economy if we maintain this level of lockdown for another month or 2 months or whatever? So these are educated guesses we can make at best. But there comes a point where we'll say, well, actually, we're going to start lifting it, even though we know that more people will die as a result of that. So the UK is suffering about 1,000 deaths a day, and goodness knows how many infections. It's like saying like 10,000 infections a day. We can't wait till when we have only 1 infection per day or 0 infections a day. That could be a year easily. And it's astonishing how this has become the new normal so quickly. We've just been desensitized to it like in a war. Just shrug it off. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to cope. We wouldn't have a moment's contentment if we're forever sorrowful about those who've died. Of course, it's a relative of yours, so you'll no doubt be grieving, or a close friend, but national bereavement isn't going to do us any good. You wallowing in sadness is not going to save a single life nor prolong one. I know we don't want to take it seriously. I certainly don't want to die from it. People I care about, I don't want them to die either. So we're going to have to accept that we lift the lockdown and more people die. We would have saved more lives if we kept the lockdown for a year. But if we kept it for 6 months, then 1,000 people will die who wouldn't have died if we had kept the lockdown for a further 6 months. Something like that. These are imponderable questions, and politicians don't want to step up to the plate and answer them because, of course, there'll be a furious tirade that they're insensitive, that they're condemning people to death. It's a bit like the one about Boris Johnson. What's the difference between Boris Johnson and Harold Shipman? Harold Shipman only killed 100 grannies. In case you don't know who he was a British physician who was a serial killer in the 90s who was killing his elderly patients, having altered their wills in his favour. So people are already breaking the lockdown a little bit. Brockwell Park in London, some adolescents gathered a fortnight ago, and who can blame them? The weather's getting warmer, they don't have exams, they're bored rigid, and they're at very little risk of catching it. Trouble is they can pass on to their parents, their grandparents. Now, there's an attitudinal variation on risk from one person to another. There's some people who are extremely reckless, other people who are hyper circumspect. Most of us are somewhere in between. And it's fascinating to note that the same individual can have a different attitude to risks of different kinds. For instance, I know someone who's very blasé about alcohol, drinks like a fish, drives, but he's very preoccupied with the risk of catching sun cancer, doesn't want to expose himself overmuch to the noonday sun in warmer climes, lathering on the maximum protection sun factor. Or people might not be worried about smoking, but very worried about the risk of dying of coronavirus or whatever it is. Even though it's not always rational, and a lot of people don't grasp probability, something's very eye-catching, like a high-profile murder, they'll be freaked out to a disproportionate degree, but they might be foolishly relaxed and incautious about something which is more likely to kill them. And people tend to become more cautious as they get older because they are more of a risk. So some people engage in hazardous behavior when they're younger and usually grow out of it. It seems to affect men more than women. Is it because men interact more and more physically in contact with each other? I don't think so. Or is it more likely to smoke? Possibly, because we got to analyze all the data and control for various factors. It killed significantly more men than women in China, partly because men are more likely to smoke. So we could open up service by service. How about dental clinics? You can only go to the dentist for urgent work at the moment, but routine work, there's going to be such a backlog. If we open up after another month, we'll have had sort of 2 months lockdown by that stage. The dentists have to work a 60-hour week to try and catch up. Courts, likewise. Okay, you can do online hearings, and why don't we move that to that anyway, and then not have to have people physically there? The bother of travelling, the cost of maintaining a proper court building, of transporting prisoners from prison to court when they might be rescued on the way, and on and on. And so doing more things online. So what should open next? Obviously, you can buy food, you can go to the pharmacy, you can buy DIY stuff. It's a great time to do DIY. How about the computer shops? If my computer breaks down, I'm screwed because I work through it. And phone shops, if my phone breaks down, I've got a big problem with working. Those could reopen. Plumbers and electricians, are they allowed to go to your house? I suppose they are. It's just you and them in some cases. The occupants could even get out of the house to minimise the danger. Pets, do you just have to let your pets die? At the moment you do. What about a farm? Do you want your herd of cattle to die? That's going to damage the economy. They're out in the open air, not much risk. Construction can go on. And take the opportunity. Repair the roads, repair the railways, repair the runways, because they're used a fraction of the amount they usually use. I saw in London that train ridership is down to 5% of its ordinary level. I've been on trains and I had the carriage to myself, my personal train, not the whole train. Okay, the carriage. So we could reopen some things. It's just the ideal time to repair the transport network because on Sunday in London, almost every time, planned engineering work, and have to get a railway replacement bus. and going out of London 5 Christmases in a row was always screwed up. Do it now. This opportunity will never return, hopefully. It's a golden opportunity to put all things right. Stress tests, repair bridges, which are normally very busy, even painting the lines. Seeing the paint's very faded and chipping away. So we could open up area by area by area. The most diffuse areas open up where it's not very badly affected. Or by age, people under a certain age are allowed out, things like that. So looking forward to getting out of lockdown. It's driving me stir crazy. I heard that Sweden doesn't have much of a lockdown, so I might go to one of these countries, Sweden and Finland, because it's more than I can take being cooped up like this. All right, so please follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, book online lessons with me in history and politics and religious studies, geography, French and law, and choose me as your tour guide in Londinium once tourism restarts in a century. And yeah, get me to help you with your thesis, your dissertation. That reminds me, I'll translate from French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, German, and Portuguese, not Portuguese, where did that come from? And Russian, into English only, my mother tongue, as you may have guessed. So please check out my British Poesy channel. I might put a link below. Toodaloo.